Gender studies is an academic field that examines how gender shapes people's lives, relationships, and society. It looks at how ideas about being male, female, or other genders are formed, and how these ideas affect power, identity, culture, and opportunities. Feminism is a movement and a way of thinking that fights for equality between all genders. It studies how women and marginalized genders have been treated unfairly in history and works to create a society where everyone has equal rights and respect. Queer theory is a field that challenges traditional ideas about gender and sexuality. It questions labels like male, female, or gay, straight, and shows that people's identities are more complex. It focuses on understanding and accepting diverse sexual orientations and gender identities. Now, here are the 6 key principles of gender studies, feminism, and queer theory. First, we have gender is socially constructed. Gender is not about biology. It is also shaped by society. People can learn how to act based on their culture teaches them. These expectations can affect clothing, behavior, and even career choices. Because these rules come from society, they can change over time. Understanding this helped us see that gender is flexible, not fixed. Number 2, we have power and equality shaped gender rules. Many societies give more power to men and fewer opportunities to women and LGBTQ+. These unequal systems have existed for many years and still affect people today. For imbalances can limit education, jobs, and social freedom. Studying gender helped us see why these inequalities happen. It also helped us find ways to create a fairer society. Number 3, we have feminism seeks gender equality. Feminism wants all genders to have equal rights and chances in life. It fights against unfair treatment, violence, and discrimination toward women and marginalized genders. Feminism also works to change laws and systems that support inequality. It teaches people to respect others regardless of gender. Overall, feminism aims to build a world where everyone is valued equally. Number 4, we have identity is a diverse and fluid. Queer theory shows that gender and sexuality are not the same for everyone. Some people do not fit into traditional labels like male or female. Others may feel that their identity changes over time. This diversity is normal and should be accepted. Understanding this helped us respect people's unique identities. Now, we have challenging norms and stereotypes. Society often expects people to behave in certain ways because of gender. Examples include saying boys should be tough or girls should be gentle. These stereotypes can limit personal growth and self-expression. Gender studies teaches us to question these expectations. When we challenge stereotypes, people have more freedom to be themselves. Lastly, we have the intersectionality matters. Intersectionality means different parts of a person's identity affect how they are treated. Gender connects with race, class, age, disability, and more. For example, a woman of color may experience discrimination differently from a white woman. Understanding these connections helps us to see the full picture of inequality. It also helps create solutions that include everyone's needs.
When we apply gender theory to literature, we focus on understanding how texts portray and construct ideas about masculinity, femininity, and other gender identities. So the first step is to analyze how characters follow or resist gender norms. This means we observe whether characters act according to the traditional expectations of their gender, such as the idea that men should be strong or dominant or the women should be gentle or submissive, or whether they challenge these expectations through their actions. Second, we examine the gender rules, expectation, and power dynamics present in the story. So here we look at how society within the text assign rules to characters based on gender. So we ask questions like who holds authority, who makes decisions, who is expected to serve, lead, or remain silent. This help us to understand whether the text reflects real-world gender inequalities or offers alternative possibilities. Finally, We check whether the text reinforces or breaks gender stereotypes. So some works may strengthen traditional beliefs by portraying characters in very predictable gendered ways, while others subvert stereotypes by giving characters unexpected traits or by criticizing unequal systems. So through this step, we can see whether the text supports or challenges societal views about gender. When we analyze a literary text using gender theory, we use several guide questions to help us examine how gender is represented and how it functions within the story. The first question is, what gender rules are present? In this part, we identify the expectations placed on male, female, or non-binary characters. We observe what tasks, behaviors, or responsibilities are assigned to them based on their gender. So this helps us see how the text constructs ideas of masculinity and femininity. Next, we ask who holds power and why. So this question focuses on distribution of authority and influence in the story. We look at which characters make decisions, control resources, or dominate conversations. We also consider why they have this power, whether it is because of their gender, their societal status, or the norms of the society portrayed in the text. We also examine how their characters perform their gender. Gender performance refers to how characters show their gender identity through actions, speech, appearance, and behavior. So we analyze whether they follow traditional expectations or express themselves in ways that challenge conventional rules. Lastly, we ask, does the text challenge gender expectations? So this question helps us determine whether the story reinforces stereotypes or offers a more progressive or critical point of view. Some texts may uphold traditional gender norms, while others may question or overturn them through character development, plot, events, or themes. When we apply feminist theory to literature, our goal is to understand how women are represented and how gender inequality operates within the text. The first step is to identify how women are portrayed. We observe whether female characters are shown as strong, confident, and independent, or if they are portrayed as weak, passive, or dependent on others. So we also take note if they are silenced or empowered, meaning, do they have control over their lives and decisions, or are they restricted by the people and systems around them? The next step is to examine the presence or absence of women's voices. So this means we check how often women speak, whether their thoughts and perspectives are highlighted, and whether they have an active role in the story. So if a text heavily centers male perspectives while ignoring female experiences, it may reflect gender imbalance. So on the other hand, a text that gives women a strong narrative voice may be challenging traditional norms. Finally, we look for patriarchal structures in the plot or setting. So patriarchy refers to social systems where men hold power and dominate leadership roles. So in a literary text, these might appear in the form of gender-biased traditions, unequal laws, or social expectations that limit women's freedom. So by identifying these structures, we can analyze how the story either reinforces or critiques gender inequality. When analyzing a literary text through feminist theory, we use several guide questions to help us understand how women are represented and how gender power operates within the story. So the first question is, are female characters independent or controlled? So here we examine if women in the text make their own decisions, pursue their own goals, and show autonomy, or if they are restricted by male characters, social expectations, or cultural norms. Next, we ask, does the text challenge or support patriarchy? So patriarchy refers to systems where men hold most of the power. So we observe whether the story reinforces these structures, for example, by showing men as leaders and women as followers, or whether it critiques them by highlighting inequalities or giving women authority and strength. Another important guide question is, who speaks the most and who is silenced? So in literature, voice is a form of power. We'll look at which characters are given dialogue, inner thoughts, and narrative control. So if women rarely speak or are ignored, it may indicate their marginalization. So if they are given strong, meaningful voices, it shows empowerment and representation. Finally, we consider how does the text portray women's agency. So agency refers to a character's ability to choose, act, and influence events. We analyze whether female characters are active participants in shaping the story or if they are merely reacting to the actions of others. So strong agency means women drive the plot or make significant decisions. Weak agency means they exist mainly in the background or under others' control. When we apply queer theory to literature, we focus on how the text represents gender, sexuality, and identities that fall outside traditional norms. So the first step is to identify queer characters, themes, or desires. So this includes looking for characters who express same-sex attraction, gender fluidity, or non-traditional identities. So it also includes noticing themes of freedom, self-discovery, or resistance against social norms related to sexuality. Next, we analyze relationships that challenge traditional norms. So this means examining relationships that do not fit the typical heterosexual or gender-conforming model. So we observe how these relationships function in the story and how the text portrays them. Are they accepted, hidden, judged, celebrated, or complicated by society? We also read against the grain to discover queer subtext. So this involves looking deeper into the text to uncover hints, metaphors, or coded expressions of queerness that may not be openly stated. So many older texts, especially those written in conservative times, often hide queer themes through symbolism or subtle gestures. So reading against the grain allows us to bring these hidden meanings to the surface. Lastly, we deconstruct binaries such as male, female, or gay, straight. So queer theory challenges the idea that people must fit into fixed categories. So in literature, we examine how the text disrupts or questions these binaries through characters, so relationships or themes. By doing so, we see how the story explores the fluidity of identity and desire. When we analyze a literary text using queer theory, we use guiding questions that help us understand how the story represents sexuality, desire, and identity beyond traditional norms. So the first question is, how does the text portray sexuality and desire? So here, we examine whether the story presents sexuality as diverse and fluid or whether it limits characters to traditional heterosexual expectations. So we also look at how desire is expressed openly, secretly, symbolically. Next, we consider, does the text reinforce or resist heteronormativity? So heteronormativity is the assumption that heterosexuality is the default or normal form of identity and relationships. So we analyze whether the text supports this idea. So for example, by only validating heterosexual relationships or whether it challenges it by showing queer relationships, alternative identities, or questioning society's norms about love and gender. Another question is, are queer identities visible or hidden? So many texts, especially older ones, may include queer characters indirectly or symbolically because open representation was not always accepted. So we examine whether queer identities are openly acknowledged in the story or if they are portrayed through subtle hints, metaphors, and implications. So the presence or absence of visibility tells us a lot about the text's cultural context. Finally, we ask, what binaries does the text challenge? So queer theory often critiques binaries such as male versus female, gay versus straight, or masculine versus feminine. So we look at whether the text breaks these rigid categories through characters who defy expectations, relationships that cross traditional boundaries, or themes that show identity as fluid rather than fixed.